I knew something was wrong the moment Nolan called Colin basement furniture during our team sync. He said it with this smug little grin like he thought it was harmless, just office banter. Everyone else chuckled into their coffee like they felt forced to laugh. Colin didn't react. Didn't even blink. Just kept clicking through the ticketing dashboard like always, eyes moving calmly across a wall of error logs that the rest of us wouldn't even touch. I'd been at Syndralogics for 8 years. Long enough to know that what really kept this company breathing wasn't Nolan's spreadsheets or those color-coded decks he was so proud of. It was Colin Merritt, the guy with the battered old ThinkPad, 3 stainless steel thermoses, and a voice so quiet you could miss it if the HVAC kicked on. Colin wasn't flashy, never pitched ideas, didn't network at happy hour, didn't even use emojis on Slack. But when something crashed, like when a client's data sync exploded at 3 a.m., or the login API vanished across an entire continent, Colin was the guy you called. And he always came through. Quietly. Completely. Over the years he'd grown into the infrastructure like ivy, low-key, tangled in everything absolutely vital. But the folks upstairs never really got it. And honestly, they didn't want to. So when Nolan Graves, all slicked back hair, cuffed designer pants, and an MBA that probably cost more than my house, strutted into the company like he'd just descended from Mount Strategy, I knew it was just a matter of time before something serious broke. He started with small moves. Consolidate infra spend. Cut human error through automation. Move to cloud-native systems. Sounded sharp in meetings. Looked great on pitch decks. But like Colin used to mutter over his keyboard, the devil lives in the dependencies. And dependencies, they don't show up on your pie charts. Quick pause before we dive deeper. If you're into this already, hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps more than you know. Alright, back to the story. Nolan branded the whole thing as operational streamlining. What it actually meant was gutting the very people who understood why the system hadn't burned down in over 10 years. He axed Colin's overtime, cut 2 of his junior sysadmins, and brought in some bargain bin contractors from a firm that misspelled redundancy in their proposal. Told the team we were going to be agile now. Said we'd be data-driven. Which was a joke, considering none of his shiny hires had even seen the systems where the real data lived. Colin didn't complain. Didn't argue. No rants. No warning emails. He just started showing up earlier. Staying later. One night around midnight, I walked past his desk and saw him working with 2 monitors running side by side. A third screen had some kind of shell script looping. It had a countdown on it. I asked what he was working on. He just said, cleaning up dependencies. I didn't ask for more. When the guy who's quietly kept your company alive for years says something cryptic at midnight, you don't push. Truth was, nobody fully understood what Colin did because things never broke long enough to make us question it. Even the CTO used to joke that Colin could vanish for a week and nobody'd notice, until the backup started failing. Nolan latched onto that line like it was gospel. During one check-in, he actually said, "No offense, but you're kind of invisible." Colin just blinked, tilted his head slightly, like he was studying a weird insect, then said, "Good systems are." It felt like watching someone insult the brakes on a bullet train. I remember seeing Nolan walk through the server room once giving a tour. He looked at the cables like they personally offended him. "This all needs to go," he told the contractor walking beside him. "Obsolete spaghetti. We'll shift everything to the cloud and script the rest. Who even needs local control anymore?" Colin was crouched nearby under a patch panel, 2 feet away, silent as always. But I saw him reach behind the server rack and run his fingers along a cable like he was checking its pulse. 3 weeks later, Nolan got a promotion. Now he was senior director. Bigger office, more screens, more buzzwords. His new obsession? Visibility. Visibility of systems. Visibility of talent. Visibility of metrics. Problem was, the one person truly holding it all together remained completely invisible to him. He tried forcing Colin into the spotlight, put him on a transition initiative, told him to document the legacy architecture for knowledge continuity. But we all saw through it. Nolan just wanted to download Colin's brain into a spreadsheet and hand it over to the contractors so they could optimize whatever they didn't understand. Colin didn't push back. He sat through the meetings, took notes, even sketched out diagrams. But while doing that, he started quietly disabling the automation scripts one after the other. No one noticed because everything still ran. The lights stayed on. But I saw it. In how Colin began tidying up his desk drawer. In how he started printing things out. In how he stopped using the centralized backup system and went back to encrypted thumb drives, switching them out each week. I asked him why. He just said, if the lights go out, someone's got to know how to find the fuse box. And Nolan? He didn't even know there was a fuse box. But Colin did. And by the time anyone higher up realized what was happening, half the switches had already been flipped. It all kicked off with a spreadsheet called Optimization Roadmap. Hit our inboxes at exactly 6:04 a.m. Bright colors, pretty fonts, looked more like a kindergarten project than a tech directive. But every line was a knife, hidden in corporate lingo. Decommission legacy protocols Q2. Consolidate server touchpoints Q3. Retire deprecated personnel processes ASAP. Deprecated personnel. That's what Colin was to Nolan now, just outdated code and a shiny new UI. At the next ops meeting, Nolan stood up front with that same smug grin he always wore when explaining things to people who actually did the work. We've identified areas of excessive manual involvement, he said, clicking over to a slide titled Preventative overhead. Right under it, a bullet list of Colin's weekly maintenance routines. These cycles are draining resources without measurable return, he said. Colin didn't even blink. Just sipped from his dented thermos and stared at the screen like he was watching a slow-motion wreck. Nolan kept going. From now on, we'll be shifting to automation-first workflows. Predictive monitoring, not reactive legacy babysitting. The consultants will help us map the transition. Next day, the consultants showed up. 2 of them. Young. Loud. One wore a Patagonia vest indoors and kept asking where our pipeline orchestration dashboards were. The other was shocked we still had on-prem servers. Colin walked them through the network topology. They squinted at the map like it was some ancient language. You guys don't use Terraform? Patagonia vest asked. Colin replied, we use what works, and turned back to his terminal. Later that week, HR pulled him in. We'd love your help onboarding the transition team, they said, all chipper like they were handing out cupcakes. It's a great opportunity to future-proof your knowledge. Think of it as mentorship. Colin didn't say a word, just gave a single nod and walked out. That night he stayed late again. On my way out, I passed his cubicle and spotted something different. A binder. Real physical binder. Label on the front. Failover decoupling CM. I asked if he was doing all right. He looked up and said, they're not future-proofing the system. They're ego-proofing it. But Nolan wasn't done. The firewall Colin had hand-maintained for years, it was now set to be replaced by a cloud-managed one. Even though Colin's version had never let a single breach through. His custom-built, meticulously tested backup system? Also on the chopping block. They disconnected his backup system and swapped it for some flashy plug-and-play solution that funneled our data through 3 different third-party platforms, each with their own version of compliance. Colin didn't fight it. He asked for a phased rollout instead. Laid out the risks in clear language. Put together thorough handoff docs. Nolan skimmed it and forwarded it to the consultants with one line. Let's simplify this. That's when Colin started printing. Not just infrastructure logs, he printed root access records, uptime metrics, firmware update trails, patch histories. Every little thing the new team didn't even know existed, let alone how to ask for. He printed everything with timestamps, version hashes, footers. All of it went into a fireproof lockbox under his desk. You paranoid? I asked him once, half joking. No, he said, flipping through a shell script. I just don't trust people who think risk looks good in a pie chart. By midweek, the contractors were bragging that they'd have core ops migrated to the cloud in 6 weeks. Nolan couldn't contain himself. Told the board we'd cut legacy costs by 37%. Started dropping hints in Slack about moving up to VP. And then the lockouts began. Slowly at first. Colin lost access to the AWS billing console. Then to the internal repo. Then the core monitoring dashboard. They called it streamlining roles. Colin didn't argue. Didn't complain. He just quietly made a list, every tool he was locked out of and every system it connected to. And for each one he ran a script. What the new team didn't realize was that all those automation routines they thought they'd inherited, They were already severed from the heartbeat triggers Colin had built. From the outside, everything looked like it was still running. But it wasn't. Everything that kept things alive, the silent checks, the buried scripts, the hidden failsafes, were running on Grace. And Colin? He was pulling the plug on Grace, one line of code at a time. Then came the email. Landed in his inbox at 8:01 a.m. Subject line: Organizational realignment, mandatory attendance. HR sender. Over 200 employees CC'd. No explanation, no agenda. Just a Zoom link, a time, and that cold corporate tone that tries to smile while pointing a loaded gun. Colin looked at it. Didn't click. Didn't react. Just minimized the window and went back to the shell script he'd been working on since dawn. It looked like a routine cron job, just another boring watchdog task. But I knew better. I was 3 rows back, pretending to finish a report, but mostly just watching. Watching the quiet precision of a man who was sharpening a knife the rest of the room had forgotten even existed. The office was louder than usual that morning. Nolan's contractor squad was on site for a vision sync. Translation: whiteboards full of buzzwords and a bunch of guys high-fiving, while someone panicked about why our CRM lost 4 leads overnight. Colin never looked up. I passed by his desk around 8:22. He was typing fast, controlled, deliberate keystrokes. I glanced at his screen. The script was named /init/exit sequence. Morning, I said, trying to sound casual, like I wasn't witnessing something irreversible. He nodded once, reached into his drawer, pulled out a thin sheet of paper, folded it with care, slid it into the inside pocket of his old canvas coat. That coat was a relic. Worn elbows, permanent smell of server rooms and coffee grounds. Probably older than most of the interns. What's in the envelope? I asked, not expecting a real answer. Instructions, he said quietly, for someone who might actually read them. At 9:01, he pushed back from his desk, saved the final config file. Then, for the first time in years, I saw him do something I'd almost forgotten. He unzipped his backpack and pulled out a USB stick, wrapped in gaffer tape, labeled in his handwriting, failover keys 0xF1. He plugged it in, then ran another script. This one was simpler. No loops, no checks, no redundancies. Just one line of code. /decouple and in shutdown for monitor. Then he waited. At 9:12, HR sent a cheerful little ping to the floor. Everyone, let's move to the lounge for the meeting. Coffee and pastries provided. That fake friendly tone made my stomach twist. Colin stood up, smoothed the wrinkles from his old coat, grabbed his badge, still clipped to his pocket, still showing that faded photo from 2012. We all filed into the lounge. Colin said nothing, didn't look anxious, just stood near the back, hands folded neatly in front of him, like a man showing up for his own execution, and already at peace with it. Nolan, of course, showed up 5 minutes late, strutting in like he was hosting a game show, wearing his Q4 efficiency jacket with the sleeves rolled up, Bluetooth earpiece blinking like a heartbeat for his ego. He clapped his hands together. All right, team. Today's about clarity, realignment, moving forward. Everyone already knew. Even the ones pretending to scroll their inboxes felt it. The whole room had that cold, sterile tension, like we were waiting for a diagnosis no one wanted to say out loud. Let's not drag it out, Nolan said with a smile. Colin Merritt, our legacy infrastructure lead, will be transitioning out as of today. 11 solid years, and we thank him. Please join me in wishing him well. Scattered applause. That weak, reluctant kind where nobody wants to be the first to stop clapping. Colin stepped forward, pulled his badge from his pocket, handed it to Nolan, and then I swear time just bent. He tilted his head slightly, looked Nolan dead in the eyes and said, "Then you'd better be ready to explain to the investors why the servers go offline in 9 minutes. Just like that. No emotion. No drama. No warning. Just a calm, matter-of-fact statement." The room went dead silent. Nolan blinked, opened his mouth, shut it, tried to laugh. Is that some kind of joke? Colin didn't answer. He just turned, walked past the rows of frozen faces, out the glass doors. No farewells. No cardboard box. No glance back. Just the quiet tick of a countdown none of them even realized had already started. Today marks the beginning of what I like to call our new era of digital clarity, Nolan announced, puffing out his chest like a dollar store Caesar. Gone are the days of undocumented workflows, opaque server maintenance, and legacy dependencies we can't even quantify. We are, as of this morning, a modern company. Applause. From the board interns, the suck-ups, the Patagonia Vest consultants. But the rest of us, the ones who'd stayed late, who'd watched Colin bring systems back from the dead with nothing but caffeine and a patch file, we just sat there. Nolan thrived on theatrics. Bright rooms, flashy buzzwords. He stood beneath the fluorescent lights like they were his personal spotlight, pacing with a wireless clicker and a grin that only got smugger with each slide. Some of you may be surprised, he said. But I believe change must be public, transparent, and decisive. That's why we're announcing this realignment today, with gratitude and a clear focus on the future. He clicked to the next slide. Title, Transitioning Key Personnel. And there it was. Colin's name. No photo. No details. Just Colin Merritt. 11 years of keeping this company alive. Reduced to a bullet point on a Canva template. Nolan gestured dramatically toward the back. Colin, if you join us? And Colin did. He didn't hurry. Didn't flinch. Just walked forward steady and calm, like a man crossing a bridge he'd already set on fire. Reached into his coat pocket and pulled out his badge. He held the badge for a second, then handed it to Nolan like he was passing off a severed power cable. It dangled awkwardly from Nolan's fingers. And then it happened. Colin tilted his head, locked eyes with him and said, cool, calm like a surgeon in an operating room. Then you'd better be ready to explain to the investors why the servers go offline in 9 minutes. The silence hit like a hammer. It was total. Immediate. Crushing. You could have heard a Slack ping on the other side of the building. Nolan blinked, then forced a laugh, short, shaky, the kind that dies halfway up your throat. Is that some kind of joke? Colin didn't respond. He just turned and walked out. Calm. Steady. Like it was just another Tuesday. Like this wasn't the moment the floor dropped out from under us. And something shifted in that room. It wasn't just the words. It was the way he said them. Like he wasn't bluffing. Like that line had always been part of the script. We'd just been too slow to read ahead. Nolan tried to brush it off. Okay, folks. Let's keep things moving. Anyone with infrastructure concerns, please reach out to the transition team. He clicked to the next slide. Nobody was watching. I saw the CTO lean in and whisper something to one of the consultants. I saw their face go pale. I saw 3 engineers suddenly remember every offhand comment Colin had ever made, and every undocumented routine we'd all ignored. And I saw it, the old server room monitor in the corner. The one we stopped using because Nolan insisted everything should be dashboard visible. Started flickering. Not just alerts. Full-on error states. Cascading across the screen like dominoes. Nolan didn't realize it yet. But the farewell he just staged? That wasn't the ending. It was the fuse. The first failure hit 60 seconds after Colin's boots hit the parking lot. It started with a single red tile on the finance dashboard. Just one. A blip. Then 2. Then 5. A minute later, the entire revenue tracker blinked out. We lost the billing relay, someone mumbled across the room. Nolan didn't even look up from his phone. Just waved it off. It'll auto-recover. They always do. Except this time. It didn't. By minute 3, the CRM flatlined. Every sales rep screen filled with the same error. Unable to load client data. Please contact your administrator. Except that admin? He was halfway across town, sipping gas station coffee while the company he'd kept running on spit and script started unraveling in real time. Nolan snapped. Restart the container cluster. Reboot the sync daemon. Do something. The lead contractor just stared at his screen like it was a puzzle with missing pieces. We don't have access to the relay's root shell, he said, voice cracking. We were told the cloud handoff was complete. It was, Nolan barked. It wasn't, came a quieter voice, the interim infrastructure lead. Colin never signed off. Said the dependencies weren't fully mapped. That's when Nolan's voice broke. What do you mean dependencies? Minute 6. The backup manager, usually a silent background app, started blaring. Literally. Colin had once set the alert to sound like a submarine klaxon and called it The last sound before litigation. Now it screamed through the room. Backup cycles froze mid-process. Logs locked up. Sync stuck in endless loops. You said you verified the new backup schema. Nolan shouted. The consultant looked like he might vomit. We assumed the scripts were automated. They weren't tied to any containerized jobs. There's no version control. Because Colin didn't need version control. He was version control. Minute 7. The comms team tried to send out an all-hands update through our internal platform. The message failed to send. Then the whole app went down. Server timeout. Authentication failure. I can't even ping the messaging service. Someone from IT whispered. It's like it just vanished. 8 minutes. Legal stormed in, demanding answers about why client systems were throwing breach flags. Marketing scrambled to draft tweets before the outage hit Twitter. Dev was cursing loud enough to shake the windows. Jira had eaten every ticket and was spitting out 404s like popcorn. And Nolan, poor Nolan, was now drenched in the kind of panic sweat you don't learn to handle in any MBA program. I want a full system schema on my desk now, he yelled, voice cracking. Where are the architecture maps? The root chains? Anything. No one answered. Because there was only one complete copy of the compiled system schema. And it wasn't in the cloud. It wasn't in the wiki. It wasn't digital at all. It was printed, folded, tucked inside the inner pocket of a canvas coat that was currently riding north on I-77, windows down, radio off. Exactly at the 9-minute mark, the final domino dropped. The internal messaging service, the one Nolan's entire real-time visibility stack depended on, flatlined. No alerts. No pings. Just a floor full of employees staring at each other, blinking like survivors in the opening scene of a disaster movie. Then the CTO said it, the line that sealed it. We don't know where anything lives. But Colin did. And Colin was gone. By 10:37 a.m., Nolan's swagger had completely evaporated. The guy who once sneered that Colin was just a glorified janitor with root access was now in the center of the war room, sleeves rolled, eyes bloodshot, yelling into a speakerphone like volume was a valid technical strategy. Just fix it, he barked at the consultants. Spin up the backup environment. Rehydrate the stack from cloud storage. A long pause. Then one of the consultants cleared her throat. Sir, there is no cloud storage. The transition wasn't finalized. Nolan blinked like he hadn't heard her right. Then where the hell is the data? She didn't respond. She didn't have to. Everyone in the room already knew. It was wherever Colin had left it. The CTO, pacing like a man awaiting judgment day, finally snapped. He pulled out his phone, scrolled to the top of his contacts, and hit Colin Merritt. Straight to voicemail. Tried again. Nothing. Then a text. Then another. No reply. Should I try from my number? A board assistant asked, whispering. Don't bother, the CTO muttered, rubbing his face. He's not ignoring us. He's watching. And he was. Colin was sitting in his usual booth at a diner across town. Same one he always went to when he needed quiet. One black coffee. One notebook. No phone on the table. His old coat hung neatly beside him like a quiet witness. Next to his mug was that folded paper, the one with the full system schema, the login fallbacks, and what I'd later find out was a list of buried kill switches that only he knew existed. He wasn't hiding. He was waiting. Back at HQ, things went from bad to biblical. Error logs filled with memory leaks. Automation scripts spiraled into loops. Redundant processes collided and choked each other out. For years, we'd let Colin patch the monster with duct tape and intuition. Now the monster was bleeding out, and doing it live in front of Nolan's efficiency slides. By noon, client calls were being escalated directly to legal. One of our oldest contracts, a financial analytics firm with ruthless SLA penalties, hit us with a breach flag. Their system had hard-coded a dependency into a microservice Colin had built 3 years ago. No one even knew it existed. Until it broke. And brought their entire platform down with it. Investor inboxes? Exploding. And Nolan's beloved dashboard, the one he'd once bragged could predict failure before it happened? Pitch black. Every single stream routed through Colin's architecture had collapsed. There were no backups. No second lines. No fallback plans. because Colin was the redundancy. And finally, someone on the board said what everyone was thinking. We're not going to fix this without him. That's when the shift started. Not with a press release. Not with some dramatic boardroom vote. Started on LinkedIn. First came a message from Ellis, one of the quieter board members. Gray hair, observant. Rarely spoke unless it mattered. Colin, I believe there's been some short-sightedness. Would you be open to a conversation? Colin read it. Didn't reply. 10 minutes later, another message, this time from the audit chair. You have leverage. We understand that now. What would it take to discuss terms? Still nothing. Then came the third message. From the founder himself, the same man who once called Colin, the only person who makes this place feel like it still breathes. Please. That was the one Colin answered. I'll meet. But only off-site. No details. No drama. No anger. Just quiet, deliberate control. The kind of message that doesn't ask for power because it already has it. And with that, the balance of the entire company tilted. The man they pushed out in front of the whole staff now held the pulse of every system they didn't even know they depended on. And Nolan? He was rootless. The meeting took place in the back of a no-name co-working space in Akron. No signage. No press. No formal record. Just 3 board members in designer wool coats. And one man in canvas sipping terrible coffee like time itself worked on his schedule. Colin didn't rush. Let the silence settle thick in the room until even the founder, the same guy who once boasted he could close funding during a root canal, started tugging at his sleeve. Finally, Colin spoke. Calm. Measured. No eye contact. Let me guess, he said, setting down his mug. You're not here because of a technical question. You're here because the ship's halfway underwater, and none of your lifeboats are patched. The audit chair leaned in, elbows on the reclaimed wood table. We were told the systems were cloud migrated. They were labeled that way, Colin said. Visually mapped. Slide deck deep. But core services, billing triggers, access auth, patching chains, vendor escalations, they're still anchored to local infrastructure. Most of it's still tied to my schema. Ellis cleared his throat. So, everything we've done since Nolan took over? Colin looked up. Wasn't infrastructure. It was a skin. A UI without a skeleton. You give it another month, a sneeze would have collapsed the whole thing. I just sped it up. The founder exhaled. Sat back in his chair. What would it take to bring it back online? Colin didn't answer right away. He reached into his coat, the one that had been with him through patchy server rooms, 3M saves, and over a decade of holding the place together, and pulled out the folded sheet. He slid it across the table. 3 lines. No branding. No padding. Just architecture. Nolan is removed. Immediately. No reassignment. No severance beyond minimums. Colin Merritt selects and leads his own infrastructure team. No consultants. No board veto. All system decisions routed through a direct channel between Colin Merritt and the board. No managerial intermediaries. No salary requests. No title grabs. No gloating. Just control. The kind that rebuilds a company from the inside out because it remembers everything it ever was. Every patch. Every undocumented failover. Every ghost in the wire's restart that kept the system alive when nobody else even knew it was dying. The board didn't argue. There was nothing to argue. Colin had just walked them through hell, without shouting, without threats, without raising his voice once. Now he was handing them a map out. And they were smart enough to take it. The founder nodded once. Done. Ellis glanced over. And Nolan? He's already out, the audit chair said. Legal sent the paperwork this morning. He tried to pin everything on the contractors. We showed him the logs. Colin didn't smile. Just gave a single nod and stood up, calm, deliberate, like a man who knew the storm had passed and the rebuild could finally begin. He left the paper behind on the table. Didn't need it anymore. That evening, while the company was still limping along, trying to reset passwords they didn't control anymore, a message quietly went out to a select group of employees. Subject: Reinstatement. Infrastructure Ops. From Board Executive Oversight. Content: Effective immediately, Colin Merritt will resume operational oversight of all core systems. Do not attempt rollback without his written consent. No apology. No explanation. But everyone knew exactly what it meant. The server whisperer was back. And this time the only people he answered to were the ones at the very top. The glass doors slid open like they always had. But this time there was no badge beep. Colin didn't need one. He walked in with Ellis beside him, silent, steady. The receptionist barely looked up, eyes wide, trying to sink behind her monitor like it might protect her. Half the office froze. A few people stood. Zach from DevOps even clapped before realizing he was the only one doing it. There was no grand entrance. No speech. No music. Just the steady sound of worn boots on polished tile, and the hushed collapse of reputations unraveling in real time. Nolan was already gone, escorted out the back 30 minutes earlier by security. According to Brenda in finance, his last words were, "This is political theater." The IT team found his beloved dashboards frozen. Infinite load screens, metrics pipelines chasing their tails through ghosted networks. The age of dashboards for show ended the moment the lights flickered and no one could explain why. Colin walked right past Nolan's empty office without so much as a glance. Past the posters that said things like "Data is truth" and "Automate to elevate." Past the corner whiteboard still full of nonsense acronyms no one had dared erase. He made his way to the old server room. Keycode still worked. No one had changed it, probably because no one dared. Inside, the air smelled like plastic, dust, and stale coffee from another era. It was the smell of a space that kept the heart pumping while everyone upstairs pretended PowerPoint was a pacemaker. Colin reached into his coat, pulled out an external drive, rugged, scuffed, labeled in that familiar handwriting. Primary rebuild, handshake 1. He plugged it into the legacy terminal, the one Nolan had called an embarrassing relic 2 weeks into the job. The cursor blinked, waiting. Colin typed, init/reclaim. Silence. Then the hum of life. Lines of green text streamed down the screen like rain on a windshield. Dependencies reconnected. Scripts found their targets. Old routines sparked awake like lights in a house that had been asleep for years. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't fast. But it worked. 2 hours later, the first wave of systems stabilized. Finance back online. CRM. Rough around the edges but recovering. Internal comms. Rebooted, running on local sync. Backups, slow but crawling back to life. Big clients had been notified. Legal was drafting statements. Somewhere in Slack someone posted, "Colin's back. We're gonna make it." It was reposted 17 times in 10 minutes. By mid-afternoon the old team, whoever was still standing, had regrouped. No instructions needed. They just got to work. It was like muscle memory. Like sliding into an old pickup truck and knowing exactly where the clutch grabs. Colin didn't give a speech. He didn't have to. He just walked the floor once, quiet, steady, eyes on the screens, like someone listening to the heartbeat of a thing he'd built with his own hands. The engineers looked up, caught his eye, gave a quiet nod, and went right back to work, like battle-worn soldiers watching their old captain step back onto the field after a long, dumb war fought by amateurs. Someone offered him Nolan's old office. Corner view, glass door, fancy chair. He turned it down. Said he didn't need a skyline to rebuild a spine. Instead, he picked a workbench in the old server room, pulled up 2 monitors, laid out a single notebook. Same dented thermos by his side. He opened a blank text file, labeled it, System Notes, Reintegration. Then typed 3 words, Begin again, thoughtfully. After that, he opened a private terminal and started mapping out a new schema fresh from the ground up. Not everything could be salvaged. Some logs were toast. A few vendor agreements were going to sting. But the foundation? The bones were still solid. And the hands that had built them were back where they belonged. Colin didn't brag. Didn't gloat. Didn't take a victory lap. But everyone in the building knew the truth now. You can fake a dashboard. You can fake clean metrics. Hell, you can even fake competence for a while. But you can't fake roots. And Colin Merritt? He never left the soil. 3 weeks later, the entire place felt different. Not louder. Not faster. Just steadier. Like the hum of a machine finally tuned right. Around lunchtime, a memo landed in our inboxes. No logos, no spin, no motivational quotes. Just a headline and a decision. Legacy Systems Transition Strategy. Under Colin Merritt. Effective immediately. No interim review. No board oversight beyond quarterly syncs. That afternoon, 3 clients who'd frozen their contracts during the meltdown reinstated them. Another emailed the board directly with one line. We trust whoever's wearing the canvas coat. Finance stopped whispering about breach penalties. Legal stopped preparing contingency statements. And the whole company, once drunk on dashboards and busy pretending automation was leadership, finally started listening again. Listening to the engineers, to the systems, to the people who built instead of talked. And Colin? He didn't make a big deal about the shift. His new office was tucked 2 floors up, quiet corner, window view facing southwest. Not flashy, not cold, just peaceful like a room built for thinking, not posturing. On the wall behind his desk was a single frame. Inside it, the same ID badge Nolan had yanked from his hand in front of the whole company. Underneath, a brass plaque engraved with the words, "You're done here." That was it. No degrees, no awards, no slogans, just a memory framed, fossilized, flipped on its head. I stopped by once to drop off a stack of log notes. One of the junior engineers was already in there. Young, bright, still had that fresh belief that clean code could fix anything. She looked at Colin like she was seeing a myth in the flesh. "Did you ever worry?" she asked. "You know that it would all crash? That you'd pull the plug and they'd just let it burn instead of calling you back?" Colin didn't answer right away. He finished typing something first, probably another invisible patch that would quietly save the company 5 years from now. Then he leaned back in his chair, cracked his knuckles and said, "Only for them." The junior blinked. "You mean for them, not for you?" He gave her a small dry smile. That signature half-smile that never quite reached his eyes, but always meant he was already 10 moves ahead. "They built dashboards," he said. "I built the thing under the dashboards." No one said anything. No one had to. Outside his window, the city kept humming, cars, cables, chaos. All running on systems nobody ever thanked until they failed. And somewhere in the hum of it all, Colin just kept building. All of it, every recovery, every sync, every restored heartbeat, ran because of a dozen invisible systems no investor deck had ever once mentioned. But they were running because Colin Merritt was back. Not louder, not prouder, just undeniable. And somewhere, probably buried under backup drives in a metal box only he knew the combination to, was a second copy of that framed ID badge. The one he almost tossed years ago. The one that used to mean he belonged. Now, he didn't need permission to exist. They needed permission to run.